If you are reading this, then myself and my kind are long gone, and this book is most likely battered and torn and eroded from the dirt. I pray to Agoda, the creator of everything, that the words and meanings do not change because of translation and speculation, or because this parchment is no longer whole or has been smudged in the sands of time. My name is Aidan, and I leave this book to you, any who will survive or be reborn, in hopes that you have evolved enough to translate these texts and to understand what has befallen my people. I pray that there may be enough time for you to save yours. If I am to warn you of our ending, then I must start from the beginning, even though it is the middle that is the most important. Chapter 1. The Beginning. Again. In the beginning, Agoda created our planet and everything that inhabits her soil. Before he came, there was nothing, a darkness that seemed unending. We know this from our sacred writings we call the Beclay. The Beclay was first spoken thousands of years before I was born, thousands of years before my furthest known relatives were born. It was spoken down from parent to child and so on, for 100 generations before it was finally put into written words. And that was 2,000 years before my life began. It is our oldest known history and is the story that is mostly believed by our people. However, as I will explain later, the story has changed over the centuries. It has been misinterpreted and sometimes intentionally skewed in order to serve the agendas of those who would want to remain in power. The main ideas and morals of stories that it tells are still very much the same as they were all those years ago, when the Beclay was first whispered from a father to his children. Parts of the Beclay have since been lost. And now, as I tell you the story of my people, I will also tell you the story of the Beclay. Not until close to the end of our civilization did we finally understand how the story of the Beclay and our own story were so very much the same. If I am correct, the story of your people will be also. And so, before Agoda came, there was nothing, a darkness that seemed unending. So he cleared the sky, and there was light. It was so beautiful, the first sunrise. It was so amazing that all those who lived in the sky with Agoda cried. And from their tears, the seas were born. For most of my life, this was the part of the story that was taken literally. That Agoda had made our blue skies, and with a thought made the sun. Out of his divine power came the great bodies of water that cover our planet. In a way, I guess it could all be true. Back when our history began, the people who were there, who witnessed these glorious spectacles, would have had no other way of explaining such wonders. As time has gone by, and our understanding of the world around us has grown, these same wonders are an everyday occurrence. We now have machines that can change the clouds in the sky. They can end years of drought and make infertile, dried-up lands green with life. We have great flying ships, thousands of which fill the skies every day. There are many more wondrous things that ordinary people use in our everyday lives. As you continue to read this, please understand that my people are not Agodas. We are men, just like you. We have no supernatural powers, only intelligent minds, just like your people most likely do. I do not know how far intellectually your people have evolved, and so I am uneasy about going into too much detail about our world. I believe there is a natural progression of evolution that has followed. This is what my people call Agoda's plan. I fear that if I were to give you too much knowledge too soon, that it could very much hasten the end of your world as you now know it. However, I also believe that there are some things you do need to know so that you can warn your people. I entrust this knowledge to you, the one who has found this book. It is your destiny to protect it with your life. You have been chosen by Agoda to be the one, and so I must believe that it was meant to be. You are not the first, nor will you be the last." "Where did you find this scroll?" said John in utter disbelief. "Are there more pages? Where did you find it? And how old do you think it is?" "Wait," Mark quickly interrupted. "I know you have lots of questions. I'll answer every one of them, but I need to know. Can you read it?" Yeah, I think so," answered John with a quiver in his voice. "It's incredible. Is it authentic?" "Yeah," said Mark with a crooked smile and a raised eyebrow. "We pulled it from a site in northern Greenland. It was almost 9 miles down under a glacier in the ruins of what seems to be an ancient shipping port of some kind. Carbon dating shows it to be from around 255,000 years B.C. "What?" exclaimed John. "That's impossible. One of the earliest known Homo sapiens, Homo 1, was found in Ethiopia, and that was only around 200,000 years ago. Even he still showed Neanderthal-like features. There's no way that they were writing books like this, sitting around the campfire, grunting at each other." "Well," Mark said, "I'm telling you that this is at least 50,000 years older than Homo." "But how?" said John. "How could paper or hide or whatever this is be so well preserved over millennia?" "It's not paper or hide, John. It's something I've never seen before. Lighter than spider web, but stronger than steel. We tried to remove a small piece for examining. It broke every blade in the lab." "I can't believe it," said John, as he carefully continued to examine the scroll. "John," said Mark with a quiet but firm voice, "this could be the most important find in all of human history." "Yeah, most important find in our history anyway," thought John to himself, as his mind was filled with the words he had somehow been able to read. Still running through his head, "Why am I able to read this scroll?" he pondered to himself. "I've never seen anything like these characters before. Is it just my imagination? The letters, they just seem to change right in front of me. Did they? Did Mark see it too? Why didn't he say anything if he did see them change? I have so many questions and no answers. I need more time to read the rest." "Okay," shouted John. "Okay, what?" Mark replied with a small giggle in his voice and a look of confusion painted on his face. "I'll do it," said John. "But I haven't even told you why I asked you to come," said Mark inquisitively. "You needed a translation, right?" "I'll do it," said John. "But I need some time, and I'll need the original pages sent to my lab in Seattle." A voice from the other room came into earshot of John. "Did I hear someone say they think they're going to take my book?" A small, thin, and athletic woman came walking into the lab where John and Mark stood. She had long red hair pulled back into a ponytail at the back of her head. She came right up face to face with John. He looked down at her and caught himself staring into the deepest and brightest green eyes he'd ever seen. It seemed she caught him staring too. "You can close your mouth now," she said with a wink and a smile. He pretended to clear his throat as quickly as he could and looked down and grinned with a look of embarrassment on his face. "John, this is my daughter, Sarah," said Mark. "That's Dr. Sarah Warren," she said with confidence as she reached her hand out toward John. "And you can't take my book. What are you, some kind of government guy or something?" "No, Sarah, this is John. Sorry, Dr. John Williams," he corrected himself, slightly mocking her. "He's an expert in ancient writings and languages, and he's an old friend." "Well, he's not that old, obviously," she said in a joking manner. "Some kind of boy genius, huh?" "Something like that," said John. "I called John here hoping that he could help translate some of the book. He needs to take it back to where I have more resource material," John quickly interrupted. "Well, wherever that book goes, I go," she said. "So, if you want it, you get me." "Great. That'd be okay, I guess," said John, in an innocent but excited voice. We'll leave as soon as I can book us a flight. Oh, no need. We'll just take the chopper, she said with a smile. Chopper? Asked John in a shaky voice, looking at Mark. God, I hate helicopters. No worries, said Sarah. I'm a great pilot. What? Cried John. You're the pilot? Mark, what the hell have you gotten me into this time? I'll just pack a bag and we're out of here, said Sarah with excitement. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of, he murmured under his breath with sarcasm. At the helicopter pad, John climbed up into the chopper with an uneasy look on his face. Now, you sure you can fly this thing, right? He asked with a playful smirk. I think so, she said in jest. I got my pilot's license last week, she added, giving him back just as much BS as he was sending her way. John liked this pretty little firecracker of a woman. She seemed to be as strong-willed and cocky as she was beautiful. She didn't seem intimidated by anything, even a boy genius, as she called him. This was a nice change for John. Women often found him to be a bit of a know-it-all, and they tended to shy away from him. As hard as he tried not to be, he always felt awkward around them. Even though John was terrified to be flying in this death trap, especially one that closely resembled a VW Bug with propeller blades, he jumped up into the cab and put on his headset with confidence. He was wearing a big smile like he'd done this 1,000 times before. He was trying to hide the fact that he was clutching the door handle so tight that his knuckles were beginning to turn white. Are you flying us? She asked him. No way, said John. Well, in that case, that's my seat, she said with a smile. Oh, sorry, he said, scooting over the other way. So much for looking cool, he thought. She smiled as she climbed up and sat in the pilot's seat. She knew exactly what he was thinking, and she was flattered. However, she wasn't about to let him know it. Okay, got your parachute? She yelled into the headset microphone and giggled as she started the engine. Ha ha, he said back. Just then his stomach felt like it hit the floor next to his feet. Sarah plunged the throttle forward, and the chopper lifted off the ground. She intentionally lifted off a bit too quickly, just to shatter any nerves he may have had left. Whoa, she said, with the chopper turning from one side to the other before zooming off toward the sun. Sorry, she yelled. First time flying solo and all, she joked, laughing at John's face. His skin was pale with fright, and his eyes were open as wide as soccer balls. Okay, he said. I give up. Sorry I questioned your talent as a pilot. What do you say we call a truce and make it to Seattle in one piece? He smiled as he reached into his book bag and grabbed the second scroll. I'm just going to do a little work for a while, he said. Just let me know if we start to go down, so I can scream Mayday into the mic before we hit the ground, okay? He laughed and added, I've always wanted the chance to say that. John pulled the tattered scroll from his bag. As the light from the cockpit shined on the upper left edge of the paper, he noticed that under the golden-like border there was some kind of pocket sewn into the page. John pulled on a loose string next to the bottom of the pocket, and as it unraveled, something cold fell into his hand. He looked down and found a small, key-like piece of metal, or what felt like metal. It seemed to be made out of the same material as the book, only it was hard like metal, not bendable like the page he held in his hand. I wonder what door you unlock, he thought. He moved his gaze to the top of the page. Just as it happened the first time, he watched as the shapes and lines started to move and change and somehow turn into letters and words that he could understand. He couldn't believe his eyes. He blinked a few times just to be sure he wasn't just seeing things. As he began to read, he quickly looked over and glanced at Sarah, just to see if she had noticed what was happening. He thought about telling her, but he'd already made such a great first impression. He didn't want her to think he was crazy, too. And so he turned back and began to read. By now, you have found the key of Tamarack. It will allow you entry into the city. I beg of you, do not misplace it or let the temptation of lucrative barter allow its separation from your hands. I assure you, the treasures you are about to gain far outweigh the few tolas you would receive for it. As John continued to read through the page, he was intrigued with every new sentence, and he couldn't believe how similar the storytelling was to the Bible stories he'd heard as a kid. There is a story in the Beclay about a man and his 2 sons. The man would work in his fields from the beginning of day until the moon was high in the sky. When Audiobook came to him and asked the man, "Why do you work so hard?" the man replied, "I must work hard to feed my 2 sons, for they are growing boys." Audiobook then said to him, "Haven't I provided enough fertile land and blessed you with enough health so that you can work half as hard? Are you not able to grow enough food to feed your sons, even thy neighbor's sons?" "Yes, O Lord," said the man, "but my family is too important to eat what we grow. I must work this hard so that my sons can eat the finest grain and wear the finest clothes, so they can grow up strong and wealthy and will not have to work in these dirty fields as I have." "My son," said Audiobook, "I have provided you just the right amount of land and hours in the day to feed your sons, so that you would have time to be home with them, and so that you could be there for them as they grew up. Not so they would grow up wealthy without you. You are missing the most precious moments of every day. These are the moments that are the most important. How can you teach them to be grown up and to raise their own families if you are not around? How will you show them that I always provide just enough? How will you teach them that there are more important things in life than wealth and prestige? How will they learn to appreciate things such as family and love if you are not around to teach them those things?" This story is an example of the morals and values that were lost and forgotten in the time of my people. This was not our undoing. However, it did contribute to our end by opening the door to powerful forces that would bring our way of life to its knees. What treasures, thought John, and where is this city? All I get are more questions. When do the answers start coming? John's mind started to wander. His thoughts turned to gold and gems and rooms filled with jewelry and other ancient valuables. But if that were the case, he thought, then why tell the story? What does the man and his sons have to do with a lost city or the treasures this key would bring? John was as confused as ever. Was the story some kind of a clue as to where the lock was that this key opened, or was all this just an elaborate hoax someone had perpetrated to send some poor sap on a wild goose chase? John's eyes started to close, and his head began to rest at the rear wall of the cockpit. He felt the scrolls slowly slip out of his fingers and back into his bag. As he started to doze off and felt himself begin to drift away into a dream, he was awakened by a loud buzz and a thump, thump, thump. The chopper was shaking violently. "Hold on!" shouted Sarah. "We're going in!" At first John thought she was joking, like before, but this time the chopper didn't stop spinning. He could see that Sarah was fighting with the control stick. Her teeth were biting down on her bottom lip, and her forehead was wrinkled with determination. "Come on, baby girl," she pleaded, as her feet pushed the rudder pedals back and forth with everything she had. "Don't fail me now. Just a bit more. Come on, you can do it." John now knew this was real. He felt the chopper begin to fall. "Look out for those trees!" he cried. I was just kidding earlier about crashing," he thought, as he heard Sarah begin to yell into the microphone. "Mayday! Mayday! We're going down! Location 49 degrees north! Hold on, John," she yelled. "This is it!" And then, pure silence. John opened his eyes. He wasn't quite sure where he was, and he could feel a slight pinch in his right arm. "What happened?" he murmured. "Did I fall asleep?" Just then his mind began to focus, and he started to remember scenes from the crash. He began remembering the fear that overcame him right before the end, and how it had just subsided without reason. Most of all, he remembered the absolute peace that he felt just before the chopper hit the ground, as if, somehow, he knew that he would survive the crash, or, at least, if he didn't, he knew he would be moving on to be with God. and that seemed to give him great comfort. He was now lying on his back and was no longer inside the helicopter. He looked around and didn't see Sarah anywhere. The air was crisp and sweet. He could smell the familiar odor of evergreens and campfires. "Well, I guess we made it home," he said to himself as he rolled over and got to his knees. "Sarah!" he yelled. "Sarah, are you okay? Where are you?" "Hi," she said. "Good you're finally awake." Sarah came walking toward him from the tree line. Her hands were full of twigs and branches. "I was getting kind of worried about you there for a while. How you feeling anyway?" she asked him. "I was just grabbing some firewood. We'll need to stay the night here, and we'll try to walk down off the mountain in the morning." But won't they send a rescue party looking for us?" asked John. "Yep," she answered. "But they'll be looking in the wrong place. I didn't have a chance to broadcast our final position. The radio's out, and I think something was screwy with the chopper's navigation compass," she said, banging her hand against the side of the radio as she removed it from the chopper's main console. "We ended up about 500 miles off our flight path, and we're way north of where we're supposed to be. So they don't even know where to look. Our best chance for survival is to hike down and try to find help. No worries. We'll be fine," she said. "Yeah," said John. "That's what you said about flying in the chopper, and look at us now." "Hey, this isn't my fault," she snapped back at him. "We're alive, aren't we? You can thank me for that later," she said with a smug look on her face. "Right now, we need to get some rest. We got a hell of a hike out of here in the morning."